The clock on the wall showed 10:15 p.m. when Robert pushed his cleaning cart through the back entrance of the Riverside Performing Arts Center. The same entrance he'd been using for the past 12 years. The same routine night after night. Most people didn't notice him. To them, he was just the guy who cleaned up after their concerts and theater shows. The invisible man in the blue coveralls who made sure everything sparkled before the morning staff arrived. Robert was 58 years old now. His back ached a little more than it used to. His hands weren't as steady as they once were. But he didn't complain. This job paid his rent and kept food on the table. That was more than some people had. Tonight, like every other night, he started with the lobby. Sweeping, mopping, emptying the trash cans filled with empty water bottles and crumpled programs. The marble floors needed to shine. The management was particular about that. As he worked, he could hear the last few people leaving the building. Staff members saying goodnight to each other, car doors closing in the parking lot. Gradually, the sounds faded away until there was only silence. This was Robert's favorite part of the night. When everyone was gone and the building belonged to him alone, he pushed his cart toward the main concert hall. The double doors were heavy, but he knew exactly how much force to use. Inside, the hall stretched out before him like a cathedral. Row after row of red velvet seats. The stage at the far end bathed in a single work light, and there, in the center of the stage, sat the grand piano. Robert looked around carefully. He always did this even though he knew he was alone. Old habits. Then he walked down the center aisle, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. What nobody at the Riverside Center knew was that Robert hadn't always been a janitor. 35 years ago, he'd been a different person entirely. A young man with a scholarship to the city's music conservatory. A pianist who dreamed of performing on stages just like this one. But life had other plans. His mother got sick during his second year at the conservatory. Cancer. She needed treatment, care, someone to be there. His father had passed away when Robert was 16, so there was nobody else. Robert dropped out of school and took the first job he could find. Then another job. Then a third one. The medical bills kept coming. Music became something he did in his head while he worked. Melodies he hummed while washing dishes or stocking shelves. After his mother passed, he told himself he'd go back to music. But by then, he was 25 and out of practice. The scholarship was long gone. He had rent to pay and couldn't afford to be a struggling musician. So music became a memory, something that belonged to another version of himself, until he started working at the Riverside Center. Robert climbed the steps to the stage. The piano sat there like an old friend waiting for him. He lifted the fallboard, revealing the keys. Black and white, perfectly aligned. His fingers remembered their positions without thinking. He sat down on the bench and took a breath. Then he began to play. The notes of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata filled the empty hall. Soft at first, almost hesitant, then growing stronger, more confident. Robert closed his eyes and let the music take him somewhere else. Somewhere beyond mop buckets and floor wax and aching joints. This was his secret. Every night during his break he played. Sometimes for 15 minutes, sometimes for 20. Never longer than that. He couldn't risk someone coming back and finding him. The piano at the center was worth more than Robert would make in 5 years. He probably wasn't supposed to touch it, but he couldn't help himself. After all those years away from music, finding this piano was like finding water in a desert. His hands moved across the keys with a grace that surprised even him. The muscle memory was still there, buried under decades of other work. The pieces he'd learned as a young man came back note by note. Chopin, Debussy, Rachmaninoff. They'd been sleeping inside him all this time. Robert played the third movement now, the part where the tempo picks up. His fingers flew across the keys. For these few minutes, he wasn't a tired janitor with bills to pay. He was a musician again. He was the person he'd almost been. The acoustics in the hall were perfect. Every note rang out clear and true. Robert had performed in this hall exactly 0 times, but he'd heard hundreds of concerts while cleaning. He knew what good sound was supposed to be, and right now in this empty space, the sound was beautiful. He didn't notice the small figure standing by the back doors. 8-year-old Lily had been at the center with her parents. Her father worked as a stage manager, and sometimes brought the family along during evening rehearsals. Tonight had been one of those nights. Lily was blind. She'd been born that way. The world came to her through sounds and textures and smells. And right now she was hearing the most beautiful sound she'd ever experienced. The music seemed to paint pictures in her mind. She could see colors somehow, even though she'd never actually seen a color in her life. The notes created shapes and feelings that made her chest tight. She stood completely still, afraid that any movement might break the spell. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. This was different from the concerts she'd attended before. Those were performances, people playing because it was their job. This was something else. This music had emotion in it that went beyond technique. It was like the person playing was putting their whole heart into every note. Lily took a small step forward, then another. She wanted to get closer to the sound, to understand where it was coming from. Robert finished the piece and sat quietly for a moment, his hands still resting on the keys. He always took a few seconds after playing, a moment of silence before returning to reality. That's when he heard it. A small sound, a footstep. His heart jumped into his throat. He spun around on the bench. There, halfway down the center aisle, stood a little girl. She had dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and was wearing a pink jacket. Her eyes were open but seemed to look past him rather than at him. "I'm sorry," Robert said quickly, standing up. I shouldn't have." "Don't stop," Lily said softly. "Please don't stop playing." Robert noticed the white cane in her hand. He understood then. She was blind, and she'd been listening. "I have to get back to work," he said, suddenly embarrassed. Here he was, the janitor, caught playing an instrument he had no business touching. "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard," Lily said. The tears on her face caught the light from the stage. "Are you a pianist?" Robert looked down at his blue coveralls, at his worn work boots, at the cleaning cart waiting at the edge of the stage. "No," he said quietly. "I'm not a pianist. I clean floors," but even as he said it, he wondered if it was true, because for those 15 minutes at the piano, he hadn't been a janitor at all. He'd been exactly what he was always meant to be. "You play like an angel," Lily whispered. Before Robert could respond, he heard voices. Adults calling out, "Lily? Lily, where are you?" Two people rushed into the hall, a man and a woman, both looking worried. When they saw Lily standing in the aisle, relief washed over their faces. "There you are," the woman said, hurrying toward her daughter. "We've been looking everywhere." The man followed close behind. "You can't wander off like that, sweetheart." That's when they noticed Robert standing on the stage, looking uncomfortable beside the grand piano, and that's when everything changed. Robert felt his face go hot. He stepped away from the piano like he'd been caught stealing something. His hands went automatically to his pockets, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. "I'm sorry," he said again. "I was just taking my break. I shouldn't have touched the piano. It won't happen again." The man and woman looked at each other, then back at Robert. The woman had her hand on Lily's shoulder now. The man, who Robert recognized as David from the stage crew, seemed confused. "You play piano?" David asked. Robert nodded, not trusting his voice. He expected them to be angry, to report him. Maybe he'd lose his job over this. 12 years of work, gone because he couldn't resist playing during his break. But instead, something unexpected happened. "That was you playing?" the woman asked. Her name was Helen, Robert remembered now. He'd seen her around the center many times, but had never really spoken to her. "Yes, ma'am," Robert said quietly. Helen looked down at her daughter. Lily's face was still wet with tears, but she was smiling. Actually smiling. It was the first real smile Helen had seen on her daughter's face in months. "Lily wandered off while we were packing up," David explained. "We've been searching for 15 minutes. We were about to call security. She must have heard the music," Helen said softly. Lily pulled away from her mother and took a few steps toward the stage. Her cane tapped lightly on the floor. "Can you play more?" she asked Robert. "Please?" Robert looked at her parents, unsure what to do. "We don't want to interrupt your work," David said, though his voice suggested he wouldn't mind if Robert did play more. "It's okay," Robert said. "I should get back to cleaning anyway." "No," Lily said, and there was something fierce in her small voice. "You can't stop. That music made me see things." The adults fell silent at that. Helen and David exchanged another look, this one longer and more meaningful. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Helen asked gently. "The music showed me colors," Lily said. "I know I've never seen colors, but the piano made them appear in my head. Blue and silver and purple, and shapes too, like waves and circles and stars." Robert felt something catch in his throat. He'd played music his whole life, but nobody had ever described it quite like that before. Helen's eyes were glistening now, too. She walked closer to the stage. "I'm sorry, I don't think we've properly met. I'm Helen Chen, and this is my husband, David. You know our daughter, Lily." "Robert," he said. "Robert Hayes, I work nights here, maintenance. Where did you learn to play like that?" David asked. Robert hesitated. He didn't usually talk about his past, but something about this moment, about Lily's tear-stained face and the way she'd described his music, made him want to be honest. "I went to the music conservatory," he said, "a long time ago. I had a scholarship, but I had to leave. Family stuff. I've been working regular jobs ever since." "But you still play," Helen said. It wasn't a question, just here during my breaks. "Nobody usually knows about it." "Well, I'm glad we found out," David said. He seemed to be thinking about something. "Listen, this might sound strange, but would you mind if Lily listened while you practice? Just for a few minutes?" Robert blinked. "You want me to play more?" "She loves music," Helen said. "We've taken her to concerts here, dozens of them. But she's never reacted like this before. I've never seen her cry from joy." Lily nodded eagerly. "It's different when you play. It feels true." Robert didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to say no, to get back to his mop and bucket and finish his shift. But another part of him, the part that had been buried for 35 years, wanted nothing more than to sit at that piano and play. "I guess I could play one more piece," he said. Lily's whole face lit up. Helen and David helped her to a seat in the front row. She sat on the edge of the chair, her hands folded in her lap, waiting. Robert sat back down at the piano. His hands found the keys again. This time he played something softer. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, one of his favorites from his conservatory days. As he played, he watched Lily's face. Her eyes were closed now, and she swayed slightly with the music. Her fingers moved in the air like she was trying to catch the notes as they floated by. When he finished, Lily let out a long breath. "That one felt like moonlight on water," she said. Robert smiled. It was the first time he'd smiled all night. Helen wiped her eyes. "Robert, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Does Lily have any musical talent?" David asked. "We've tried to get her interested in different activities, but nothing seems to stick. She gets frustrated easily." Helen nodded. "She goes to a school for blind children, and they're wonderful. But Lily struggles with confidence, with feeling like she can do things other kids can do." Robert looked at the little girl sitting in the front row. She was only 8 years old, but he could see something in her. A hunger. The same hunger he'd felt at her age when he first heard someone play piano. "Has she tried learning an instrument?" Robert asked. "We've thought about it," Helen said. "But lessons are expensive, and we weren't sure if she'd stay interested. And finding a teacher who knows how to work with blind students," she trailed off. The implication hung in the air. Robert knew he should stay quiet. He should finish his shift, go home to his tiny apartment, and forget this conversation ever happened. He had his own problems. His landlord was raising the rent next month. His car needed new tires. He was already working extra hours just to make ends meet. But something made him speak anyway. "I could teach her." He heard himself say the words. Surprised him as much as they surprised the Chens. "What?" Helen asked. "I could give her piano lessons," Robert said more confidently this time. "I mean, I'm not a professional teacher or anything, and I've never taught a blind student before. But if she wants to learn, I could try." Lily jumped up from her seat. "Really, you'd teach me?" "Lily, sit down," David said gently. He looked at Robert with concern. "That's very kind of you, but we couldn't ask you to do that. Teachers charge a lot for lessons, and you'd have to—" "I don't want money," Robert said quickly. I haven't taught anyone in decades. But if Lily wants to learn, I'd be happy to try." Helen shook her head. "We couldn't let you do that for free. Your time is valuable." Robert thought about his small apartment, his second-hand keyboard that he'd bought at a thrift store years ago, his life that consisted of work, sleep, and more work. When was the last time he'd done something that made him feel alive? Really alive, not just existing? "How about this?" he said. "We try one lesson, just one. If it doesn't work out, no harm done. If it does, well, we'll figure something out." David and Helen looked at each other. One of those married couple conversations that happens without words. Finally, Helen turned back to Robert. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. No, Robert thought. He wasn't sure at all, but he looked at Lily's hopeful face and heard himself say, "Yes, I'm sure." "When?" Lily asked, bouncing on her toes. Robert thought about his schedule. He worked nights from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. He slept during the mornings. His afternoons were usually for errands and chores. Saturday afternoon, he suggested. Around 2? We'll be there, Helen said. She pulled out her phone. Can I get your address? As Robert gave them his information, part of his brain was screaming at him. What was he doing? He barely had time to sleep. His apartment was a mess. He hadn't taught anyone anything in 35 years. But another part of him, the part that still remembered what it felt like to be young and full of dreams, was excited in a way he hadn't felt in decades. After the Chens left, Robert stood alone on the stage for a long moment. Then he looked down at the piano and whispered, "What have I gotten myself into?" The piano, of course, didn't answer. But somewhere deep in his chest, Robert felt something he'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. Saturday came faster than Robert expected. He spent Friday night after work cleaning his apartment. Not that it was dirty exactly, but it wasn't the kind of place you invited people to either. He lived in a small one-bedroom on the 3rd floor of an old building. No elevator. The carpet was worn thin in spots. The walls needed paint, but it was home, and the rent was something he could almost afford. The living room barely had space for his second-hand keyboard, a small couch, and a coffee table. He'd pushed the couch against the wall to make room. Sheet music was stacked everywhere, on the floor, on the windowsill, on top of the keyboard itself. Robert had collected the music over years. Some pieces he'd bought new back in his conservatory days. Others he'd found at yard sales and thrift stores. He couldn't resist buying sheet music even when he could barely afford groceries. At 1:45 p.m. he made himself sit down. His hands were shaking slightly. What if he couldn't teach? What if Lily got bored? What if her parents realized he had no idea what he was doing? The knock came at exactly 2 o'clock. Robert opened the door to find Lily standing between her parents. She was holding her white cane and wearing a yellow dress with flowers on it. She was smiling. "Hi, Mr. Robert," she said. "Just Robert is fine," he said, stepping aside to let them in. "Come on in. Sorry about the mess." "This isn't a mess," Helen said, looking around. "You should see our place." David noticed the stacks of sheet music. "Wow, you've got quite a collection here." "Yeah, I've been gathering these for a while," Robert said. He felt self-conscious suddenly. His whole life was in this small apartment. His dreams reduced to old paper and worn furniture. Lily had already made her way to the keyboard. She reached out carefully, her fingers finding the edge of the keys. "Can I touch it?" she asked. "Of course," Robert said. "That's your piano now. For as long as you're learning." Lily pressed down on one key, middle C. The note rang out clear in the small room. "We should probably discuss payment," David started to say, but Robert shook his head. "Let's just see how today goes first." Helen and David exchanged that look again, the one that said they were talking without words. Finally, Helen nodded. "We'll be back in an hour," she said. "Unless you need us to stay?" "We'll be fine," Robert said, with more confidence than he felt. After her parents left, Robert pulled up the old piano bench he'd been using for years. He patted the spot next to him, and Lily sat down. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Robert realized he had no idea how to start. He'd never taught anyone before, let alone a blind child. All his training had been about playing, not teaching. "Are you nervous?" Lily asked suddenly. Robert laughed. "Is it that obvious?" "I can hear it in your breathing," Lily said. "It's faster than normal. You're right. I am nervous. I've never taught piano before." "I've never learned piano before," Lily said. "So we're both doing something new." Robert smiled. "This kid was pretty smart." "Okay," he said. "Let's start with the basics. Give me your right hand." Lily held out her hand and Robert took it gently. Her hand was so small in his. He guided it to the keyboard. "This is middle C," he said, pressing her finger down on the key. "It's right in the middle of the keyboard. Everything else is measured from here. Can you feel where it is?" Lily nodded. She pressed the key again, then ran her fingers along the keys around it. "The white keys are smooth," she said. "The black keys are higher." "Exactly. Now here's something interesting about piano keys. They make a pattern. Can you feel it?" Robert guided her hand along the keyboard. "Feel how the black keys come in groups? 2 together, then a space, then 3 together, then a space, then 2 again." Lily's face lit up. "Yes, I can feel it. That pattern repeats all the way across the keyboard. Robert explained. So if you ever get lost, you can find middle C by feeling for the pattern. Middle C is always right before a group of 2 black keys. For the next 20 minutes, they worked on finding middle C over and over. Robert would tell Lily to put her hands in her lap, then ask her to find middle C again. Every time she got a little faster. You're a natural at this, Robert said. Really? Lily asked. Her whole face glowed with pride. Really? Now let's learn your first 5 notes. Robert taught her the C major scale, just the first 5 notes. C, D, E, F, G. He had her play them over and over, slowly at first, then a bit faster. He showed her how to curve her fingers, how to keep her wrists loose. But here's where teaching a blind student was different. Robert couldn't just demonstrate and expect Lily to copy what she saw. He had to guide her hands with his own. He had to describe everything in terms of feeling and sound. When you play E, it should feel like stepping on a stone to cross a stream, he said. Firm but gentle. Not too hard, not too soft. Lily tried it. Too hard at first, then too soft. Then on the 3rd try, just right. Perfect, Robert said. They worked on those 5 notes for the rest of the lesson. Up and down and up. C to G, G to C. Over and over until Lily's fingers knew the pattern without thinking. What surprised Robert was how much Lily remembered. She had something he'd seen before in a few rare students at the conservatory. Perfect pitch. She could hear a note once and know exactly what it was. And her musical memory was extraordinary. When he played the 5-note pattern once, she could play it back exactly, matching his rhythm, his touch, everything. Lily, Robert said carefully, has anyone ever told you that you have perfect pitch? What's that? It means you can identify any note just by hearing it. Most people can't do that. It's a gift. Lily's smile got even bigger. I have a gift? You have a big gift, Robert said. It's going to make learning music much easier for you. The hour passed quickly. Too quickly. When Helen and David knocked on the door, Robert was surprised to see it was already 3 o'clock. How did it go? Helen asked as soon as Robert opened the door. Mom, I learned 5 notes, Lily announced. Listen. She went to the keyboard and played her scale. C, D, E, F, G, then back down. G, F, E, D, C, not perfect, but pretty good for a first lesson. Helen's hand went to her mouth. David grinned. That's amazing, sweetheart, Helen said. Robert says I have perfect pitch, Lily added. That means I have a gift. She does, Robert confirmed. She's got natural talent. With practice, she could be really good. David pulled out his wallet. Let us pay you for today at least. Robert held up his hand. No, I told you, I want to see if this works first. Let's do a few more lessons. If Lily keeps enjoying it, then we'll talk about payment. Robert, that's not fair to you, Helen protested. But Robert was firm. The truth was, he'd enjoyed the last hour more than he'd enjoyed anything in years. Teaching Lily reminded him why he'd fallen in love with music in the first place. It wasn't about perfect technique or flawless performances. It was about the joy of creating something beautiful. Same time next week? Robert asked. Yes, Lily said before her parents could answer. Helen and David agreed, though they still looked uncomfortable about not paying. After they left, Robert sat at his keyboard and played the 5 notes Lily had learned. C, D, E, F, G, such simple notes, the building blocks of music, but he couldn't help thinking about what they could become. Those 5 notes were the beginning of something, the start of a journey. He just didn't realize yet how much that journey was going to cost him. Over the next 3 months, Robert and Lily met every Saturday. 2 o'clock without fail. Rain or shine, tired or energized, Robert made sure he was ready to teach. Lily progressed faster than Robert could have imagined. Within 4 weeks, she knew both C major scales, left hand and right hand. By week 8, she could play simple songs. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. Mary had a little lamb. Basic stuff, but she played with such joy that it sounded beautiful. Robert developed his own teaching methods. He couldn't use visual demonstrations, so he described everything through touch and feeling. He'd guide Lily's hands, showing her the right positions. He'd play a phrase, then have her repeat it back to him. This chord feels like tree bark, he'd say. Rough and strong. This one feels like flower petals, he'd tell her. Soft and delicate. Lily understood these descriptions better than any technical explanation. Her playing began to have emotion in it. Real feeling. But while Lily was growing, Robert was struggling. He'd started turning down overtime at work to make sure his Saturday afternoons were free. That meant less money. Then his landlord raised the rent by $100 a month. Robert's budget, already tight, became impossible. He started skipping meals. Breakfast first, then lunch. Dinner became crackers and peanut butter most nights. He told himself it was temporary. He'd figure something out. But then his car broke down and the repair cost $600 he didn't have. So he started taking the bus to work. That added an hour to his commute each way. 2 hours less sleep every night. On top of his night job at the Performing Arts Center, Robert picked up weekend cleaning work at an office building. Saturday mornings before Lily's lessons, and Sunday mornings too. He was working 7 days a week now, sleeping maybe 4 hours a night. His hands started shaking. Not much, but enough that he noticed. Enough that sometimes he'd miss notes when he played. During one lesson, Lily stopped playing and turned toward him. "Robert, are you okay?" she asked. "I'm fine. Why?" "Your music sounds different, sad." Robert forced a smile she couldn't see. "Just tired, that's all." But Lily knew. Kids always know when something's wrong. After that lesson, she told her parents, "Something's wrong with Robert. He's sad, but he won't tell me why." David decided to find out what was going on. David Chen was a stage manager, which meant he was good at noticing details. And he'd started noticing things about Robert that worried him. The man looked thinner each week. His clothes hung loose on his frame. Dark circles had appeared under his eyes. And last Saturday, David had seen Robert's hands trembling when he reached for his water bottle. So David did what any concerned person would do. He asked around. It didn't take long to find out the truth. Robert worked the night shift at the Riverside Center, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., but he'd also picked up weekend cleaning jobs. One of the security guards mentioned seeing Robert at an office building Saturday mornings at 7. Another person said they'd spotted him cleaning a small restaurant on Sunday mornings. David did the math. If Robert finished his night shift at 6, took the bus to the office building by 7, cleaned until noon, then came home to teach Lily at 2, that meant he was getting maybe 3 or 4 hours of sleep on Saturdays, and probably the same on Sundays. The man was working himself to death. And for what? Why was he pushing so hard? Then David learned about the rent increase. The car that broke down. The fact that Robert had been refusing payment for Lily's lessons for 3 months now. That evening, David told Helen everything. "We have to do something," Helen said immediately. "He's doing this because of us. Because he won't take money for teaching Lily." "I know," David said. "But every time I try to pay him, he refuses." "Then we don't give him a choice," Helen said firmly. The next Saturday, David showed up at Robert's apartment at 1:30, half an hour early. He knocked on the door and waited. Robert answered, looking confused. "Is everything okay? Is Lily all right?" "Lily's fine. She's with her mom. I came to talk to you." Robert's face went careful. "About what? Can I come in?" Robert hesitated, then stepped aside. The apartment looked even more sparse than before. David noticed there was hardly any food in the kitchen. A box of crackers. Some peanut butter. That was it. "Robert, I'm going to be direct," David said. "I know you're working 3 jobs. I know your landlord raised your rent. I know you've been skipping meals." Robert's jaw tightened. "I don't need charity." "It's not charity. You're providing a service. Teaching my daughter. You should be paid for that. I told you from the beginning I didn't want money." "And that was generous," David said. "But 3 months have passed. Lily's made incredible progress. You've given us dozens of hours of your time, and you're literally starving yourself to do it." "Fine," Robert said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You're not fine. Helen and I looked up what piano teachers charge in this city. Private lessons run about $60 an hour. You've given Lily probably 40 hours of instruction. That's $2,400 you've refused." Robert shook his head. "I can't take that money. Teaching Lily, it's not about money. It's about," he stopped, struggling to find the words. "It's about having a reason to play again, a purpose. Do you understand?" David sat down on the worn couch. "I do understand. But Robert, you can't help Lily if you collapse from exhaustion. You can't teach if you're too weak to play. I'm managing." "Are you?" David looked at him directly. "When was the last time you ate a real meal?" Robert didn't answer. "That's what I thought," David said. He pulled out an envelope from his jacket pocket. "This is payment for the lessons so far. $2,400. And before you refuse, know that if you don't take it, Helen and I won't let Lily come back for lessons." Robert's eyes went wide. You can't do that. Lily loves piano. She's getting so good. Then take the money. Let us pay you what you're worth. They stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, Robert took the envelope with shaking hands. Thank you, he whispered. David stood up. And from now on, $60 per lesson. No arguments. Lily will be here at 2 as usual. After David left, Robert sat on his couch holding the envelope. He didn't open it right away. He just sat there feeling the weight of it in his hands. $2,400. It was more money than he'd seen at once in years. It meant he could pay rent, buy food, get his car fixed, maybe even sleep a few extra hours, but it also meant something else. It meant he was a real teacher now, a professional, someone whose time had value. The thought terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. That week, Robert bought groceries. Real groceries. Fresh vegetables, chicken, bread. He ate 3 meals a day and couldn't believe how much better he felt. The shaking in his hands lessened. The fog in his brain started to clear. He kept the weekend cleaning jobs for now, but at least he wasn't starving anymore. Lily's lessons continued. She was working on more complex pieces now. Bach's Minuet in G, a simplified version of Beethoven's Ode to Joy. Her small hands were getting stronger. Her playing more confident. But more than that, Lily herself was changing. Helen reported that her daughter was more confident at school. She participated in class more, made friends easier. The piano lessons were teaching her more than just music. They were teaching her that she could do difficult things. That being blind didn't mean being helpless. One Saturday, after Lily had been taking lessons for 5 months, she played through an entire piece without a single mistake. It was Mozart's Vous dirais-je, maman? The melody, better known as Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, but the full classical arrangement. When she finished, she turned to Robert with a huge smile. How was that? That was perfect, Robert said, and he meant it. Lily, you've come so far. I'm proud of you. Could I play in front of people? She asked suddenly. The question caught Robert off guard. What do you mean? Like a concert. Could I do that? Play piano for an audience? Robert thought about it. Lily had been playing for 5 months. She knew a handful of pieces well. But performing was different from practicing. There was pressure, nerves, the fear of making mistakes in front of people. Maybe someday, Robert said carefully. You'd need to practice more first. But someday I could? Someday, yes. If you keep working hard. Lily nodded, satisfied. But Robert could see the wheels turning in her head. She was already imagining it. Already dreaming of being on a stage. 2 weeks later, Robert arrived at the Riverside Center for his night shift and found an ambulance parked outside. His supervisor met him at the door. Robert, thank God you're here. Johnson called in sick and Martinez had a family emergency. We need you to cover the entire building tonight. By yourself. Robert's heart sank. The Riverside Center was huge. Covering it alone meant he'd be working non-stop for 8 hours straight. No breaks. No time to play the piano. I'll do it, he said, because what else could he say? That night was brutal. Robert pushed his cleaning cart from one end of the building to the other. His back ached. His feet throbbed. He was 58 years old, and his body was reminding him of that fact with every step. Around 3 in the morning, while mopping the main hallway, Robert felt a sharp pain in his chest. He stopped, leaning on his mop for support. The pain spread down his left arm. He knew what this was. He'd seen it happen to his father years ago. Robert tried to call for help, but the words wouldn't come. The hallway tilted sideways. The mop fell from his hands with a clatter that echoed through the empty building. Then everything went dark. He woke up in a hospital bed. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A nurse was checking his IV. Welcome back, she said with a professional smile. You gave everyone quite a scare. What happened? Robert's voice came out as a croak. You collapsed at work. Severe exhaustion and malnutrition. Your body basically shut down. The doctor wants to talk to you about your work schedule. Over the next 2 days, Robert learned just how close he'd come to dying. His body had been running on empty for months. The doctor said he was lucky someone found him when they did. Helen and David came to visit. Helen looked like she'd been crying. We're so sorry, she said. This is our fault. We should have insisted you stop working so much. It's not your fault, Robert said weakly. I made my own choices. David sat in the chair beside the bed. The doctor says you need to cut back on work. Way back. You can't keep doing this to yourself. I know, Robert said, but I can't afford to work less. I have rent, bills, and I want to keep teaching Lily. About that, David said. Lily wants to do something for you. She has an idea. It's big. Maybe crazy, but she's determined. What kind of idea? Helen smiled through her tears. She wants to perform a concert. To raise money for you. She says you gave her music and now she wants to give something back. Robert felt his eyes sting. She's only been playing 5 months. That's not enough time to— We know, David interrupted. But you don't know our daughter. When she sets her mind to something, she doesn't give up. She wants to do this. The question is, will you help her? Robert looked at the ceiling, thinking about Lily, about her determination, her gift, her heart. Yes, he said finally, if she wants to do this, I'll help her. What Robert didn't know was that this decision would change everything, not just for him, but for Lily too. And for everyone who would hear her play. Robert spent 4 days in the hospital. When he got home, his apartment felt different somehow. Quieter, emptier. He'd been forced to take 2 weeks off work to recover, and the silence was almost too much. But Lily didn't let him rest for long. She called him the day after he got home. Well, Helen called, but Lily did all the talking. Robert, I've been practicing 8 hours a day, she announced. I'm going to be ready. I promise. Lily, you don't have to do this, Robert said. I'm okay. Really. You're not okay, and I want to help you the way you helped me. Please let me do this. How could he say no to that? Over the next 3 weeks, Robert and Lily worked harder than they ever had before. Even though Robert was supposed to be resting, he couldn't stay away. They met every day now, not just Saturdays. Lily would come over after school and they'd practice for 2 hours. Robert taught her 5 complete pieces. The Mozart she already knew. A simplified Bach prelude. A gentle Debussy arrangement. A Chopin nocturne. And for the final piece, something special. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the first movement. The same piece Robert had been playing the night they met. This one is important, Robert told her. This is where our story started. Lily nodded seriously. She understood. But teaching her the Beethoven was hard. The piece was technically challenging, especially for someone who'd only been playing for 6 months. The left hand had to maintain a steady rhythm while the right hand played the melody. It required coordination Lily was still developing. They practiced that piece more than all the others combined. Over and over. Sometimes Lily got frustrated and her eyes would fill with tears. I can't do it, she'd say. It's too hard. Yes, you can, Robert would tell her. You just need to break it into smaller pieces. Let's work on just the first 4 measures. Slowly, painfully, it came together. Lily's small hands learned the patterns. Her fingers grew stronger. And most importantly, she learned to feel the music, not just play it. Meanwhile, Helen and David were organizing the concert. They'd approached the management at the Riverside Center, and surprisingly, the management agreed to donate the small recital hall for 1 evening. David used his connections in the performing arts community. Helen started a social media campaign. They called it Lily's Gift, a concert for music education. They told the story of a blind 8-year-old girl learning piano from a janitor who'd once dreamed of being a concert pianist. They explained how Robert had nearly died from exhaustion because he refused to charge for lessons. The story spread fast. Local news picked it up. People shared it online. Within 2 weeks, all 200 seats in the recital hall were reserved. Then people started asking if they could stand in the back. The center had to set up a waiting list. Donations started coming in even before the concert. $20 here, $50 there. People were moved by the story, by the idea of a janitor and a blind girl helping each other through music. Robert watched it all happen with a mixture of awe and terror. This had grown so much bigger than he'd imagined. What if Lily got nervous and couldn't play? What if people were disappointed? What if he'd pushed her too hard, too fast? The night before the concert, Robert couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about all the things that could go wrong. At 2 a.m, his phone rang. It was Helen. I'm sorry to call so late, she said. But Lily can't sleep. She wants to talk to you. A moment later, Lily's voice came through the phone. Robert, are you scared about tomorrow? A little bit, Robert admitted. Are you? A lot, Lily said. What if I mess up? What if I forget the notes? Robert thought carefully about what to say. Lily, do you remember the first day you came to my apartment? You could barely find middle C. Now you can play Beethoven. That's amazing. That's a miracle, really. But what if it's not good enough? Music isn't about being perfect, Robert said. It's about sharing something true. When you play tomorrow, don't think about the audience. Don't think about mistakes. Just think about the music. Think about how it makes you feel. Let that feeling flow through your fingers. Like when you played that first night? Lily asked. When I heard you in the concert hall. Exactly like that. There was a pause. Then Lily said, Thank you, Robert, for everything. Thank you, Lily, for reminding me why music matters. The next evening, Robert arrived at the Riverside Center early. He was wearing a suit David had helped him buy. It was the first new suit he'd owned in 20 years. He felt strange in it, like he was pretending to be someone he wasn't. The recital hall was filling up fast. Robert saw people he recognized, staff from the center, musicians he'd watched perform over the years. But there were also strangers, people who'd heard the story and wanted to be part of it. Backstage, Lily sat in a chair, very still. She was wearing a white dress with blue flowers. Her mother had braided her hair. She looked so small, so fragile. How are you feeling? Robert asked. Nervous, Lily admitted. There are so many people out there. I can hear them talking. I know. But here's a secret. They're all on your side. Every single person out there wants you to succeed. They're not here to judge. They're here to support you. Lily nodded, but Robert could see her hands shaking. At 7 o'clock, the lights in the hall dimmed. David walked on stage to introduce the concert. He told the story briefly. How Lily and Robert had found each other. How music had transformed both their lives. Then it was time. Helen guided Lily to the stage entrance. Robert walked beside them. When they reached the wings, Robert knelt down so he was at Lily's eye level. Remember, he said softly, don't play for them. Play for yourself. Play because you love it. Lily took a deep breath. Then Helen guided her onto the stage. The audience erupted in applause. It went on and on. Lily stood there, her white cane in one hand, waiting. When the applause finally faded, Helen helped her to the piano bench, then quietly left the stage. Lily sat alone at the grand piano. The same piano Robert had played in secret for 12 years. She lifted her hands, found the keys, and positioned her fingers. The hall fell completely silent. Then Lily began to play. She started with Mozart. Her fingers moved across the keys with surprising confidence. Yes, there were small imperfections. A note held slightly too long. A transition that wasn't quite smooth. But none of that mattered because Lily was playing with her whole heart. Robert stood in the wings watching. Tears ran down his face. This little girl who'd been so uncertain 6 months ago was performing in front of 200 people. And she was beautiful. Lily moved through her pieces. The Bach, the Debussy, the Chopin. Each one better than the last. She was gaining confidence with every note. Then came the final piece. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Lily paused before starting, taking a moment to center herself. Then her hands found the opening notes. The familiar melody filled the hall. Soft and haunting, the same piece that had brought them together. But now it meant something more. It was a conversation between teacher and student. A thank you, a celebration of how far they'd both come. Robert closed his eyes and listened. He remembered playing this piece alone in an empty hall, thinking no one could hear, thinking his music didn't matter. How wrong he'd been. When Lily played the final note, she held it, letting it fade naturally into silence. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Then the audience exploded. People stood up, applauding, some crying. The ovation went on for 5 minutes. Lily sat at the piano, smiling, tears streaming down her face. Robert walked onto the stage. The audience somehow applauded even louder. He went to Lily and took her hand. You did it, he whispered. We did it. Lily corrected him. Later that evening, after everyone had left, Robert stood alone on the stage. David had told him the concert raised $47,000. $47,000. It was more money than Robert had made in 2 years of cleaning floors. The center's management had also offered him a new position. Piano instructor. Teaching underprivileged children. With benefits and a real salary. He could quit his night janitorial job. He could sleep. He could live. But none of that was what made Robert cry as he stood on that empty stage. What made him cry was realizing that his life had meaning again. That his music mattered. That 35 years ago, when he'd given up his dreams to take care of his mother, he hadn't lost everything. He'd just been waiting. Waiting for the right moment. Waiting for the right student. Waiting for Lily. He sat down at the piano and played Moonlight Sonata one more time. Not for an audience. Not for money. Just for the pure joy of it. And somewhere in the night, the music carried on, touching lives in ways Robert would never fully understand. Because that's what real music does. It doesn't stay contained. It spreads outward like ripples on water, reaching further than you can imagine. Robert had cleaned floors for a living, but his piano lessons had given a blind girl a new life. And in return, she'd given him something just as valuable. She'd given him himself back.